My mind was elsewhere as we strolled along the boardwalk, but ironically, it wasn't lost in the sea of worry it usually found itself in. Instead, I kept replaying everything that had happened on the ride. Or rather, what hadn't happened. V had been right. There was happiness to still be found, even if those moments were fleeting. Those 3 minutes, I'd been sure to make her eat her own words about that, had been pure bliss. I hadn't been worried about our relationship, Eddie's, or my sorry past that has finally regurgitated itself onto our lives. There'd been no crisis of identity, or trying to understand what had happened to the old Judy and if the new one could ever live with herself. For 3 minutes, I had left all of that behind and had only looked forward to the next thrill that awaited me. It was the best gift V could have given me. Even though the crowd remained dense, things still seemed quieter, and it was no arduous task to embrace the night. V had pulled me inside of another tent to examine a display of sundresses that had caught her eye. It was strange to see her interested in that style of attire since I'd never seen her wear anything like that before. Jeans and shorts, those had been the staples she'd stuck to ever since we'd met. And the thought of a mercenary running the streets in a floral pattern dress that cut off below the knees? I watched, amused, as she plucked one off a hanger and draped it over her chest. What do you think?
You look like a gonk.
It's not bad. Don't think yellow's your color, though. Maybe blue? V shook her head and hung it back on the rack. No, that's your color. Although if you can find something in hot pink with black leather accents and a deep V-neck. V rolled her eyes into the back of her head and mouthed, yum. Come on, I tugged on her arm. I'm getting hungry, and those funnel cakes smell fucking delicious, and you're buying since I'm poor. Fine, V groaned, allowing me to pull her out of the tent. But if I'm the one putting in a full day's worth of work and then having to buy you dinner, you better believe I'm gonna be taxing that. V's eyes widened and she slapped a hand over her mouth. She looked back at me in shock. I'm so sorry. It took me a moment to realize what had set her off. We hadn't talked about it, hadn't done it, since I'd woken up in that fucking hospital nearly 2 weeks earlier. Detoxing and puking my guts out wasn't much of a turn-on, nor was discovering that one's own rape had been recorded and sold on the black market as porn. Pulling me out of the bathtub and treating the cut I'd carved into my wrist hadn't done much to set the mood either. The scar wasn't bad and was fading a little each day, but there would always be a mark there to remind me of what I'd done. It was understandable, considering we'd literally been living a nightmare recently. But it was creeping into my thoughts more often as of late. That one word, which had profoundly defined my life in so many ways. Sex. Why did I feel nervous whenever V stepped out of the shower? Why did I always close the door when I changed? Why couldn't I push away all of these fucking irrational fears and be intimate with her? We both knew one another's sex drives. It was no secret we'd easily broken the record for our longest dry spell, and even then, I had dosed myself with ice the last few times we had fucked, forcing my body to do the heavy lifting so my mind didn't have to. When was the last time we had enjoyed some simple, healthy sex? Had I ever? V, I said lovingly, don't say you're sorry. You can't be picking apart every word you ever say to me. Still, I shouldn't have said that. I shook my head and sighed. We can't keep doing this to ourselves. Walking on pins and needles, always wondering if we're saying the wrong thing. We're supposed to be talking honestly with each other, right? V looked at me with a quizzical expression on her face. Right? Then, I'll be honest. I lowered my voice. Even though no one could hear us over the music and dull roar of the crowd, this was still something that belonged between the two of us. Which made it even weirder that I had picked now, of all times, to say what I did. I feel nervous about it. Taking you under the covers, I mean. I know that I shouldn't, that I can trust you and all that, but can't help it. It's not the sudden ringing of a bell followed by an outburst of laughter drew our attention toward a group of nearby kids. They were cheering for one of their friends who just won a prize, a cheap stuffed animal that certainly wasn't worth the price they'd paid to play the game in the first place. Still, such innocence was a rare sight. V pulled me off to the side. "Let's talk here," V said. I snorted and shook my head. "Yeah, 'cause this is so private. We ought to be discussing our sex life back at home, not right next to the bearded lady or the creepy fish man. True, but we fit right in at least." I laughed and allowed V to slide her arms around my waist so she could pull me closer. Her voice turned sober. "What were you trying to say before?" I don't know. I don't know, V. I feel weird, is all." V frowned. "I get it, and don't you dare apologize for it. If it'll make things easier for you when we get home, I'll go ahead and set up shop on the couch for a while until you're—" "No, V, that's not what I want. Not what I meant." "Well, what do you mean then? How did I always manage to screw up these kinds of conversations? I'd save myself loads of trouble if I could ever just say what I meant. But drifting around the edges of things seemed to be where I was perpetually stuck at." With a deep breath, I braced myself to blurt everything out and hope for the best. "I'm all kinds of fucked up." I quickly raised my hand to cut off the "don't do that to yourself" litany V was about to espouse. "The last time we had sex, when I wasn't fucked up on shit, was... I don't even know when. Weeks ago? And even then, there was all the booze. You know I got problems, V, and I don't know where to start with any of them, but none of that shit matters because I love you, and I'm scared that I'll fuck all of this up, that I'll go right back to using it like a weapon instead of just being with you. It ain't about you touching me, it's that I don't trust myself to touch you back. Baby." V planted a gentle kiss on my forehead. The feeling of her lips pressed against my skin soothed me, as did the fact that I'd just bared a piece of my soul to her and the world hadn't ended. She'd taken it all in, accepting all of its ugliness. Her hand found its way to my cheek. "I love you too. Do you think you could try something for me? Wish I could think of another brilliant way to demonstrate it, but my stomach's still not settled from before, and I don't think I can handle any more flights of inspiration." "Not sure I can either," I chuckled. "What is it?" Her eyes had that piercing look to them once again. I swear, they had a way of cutting right to the core of me, as if she had an all-access pass I hadn't realized I'd given her. "Try not to look backward. We all got shit we think we left in the dust that's just waiting for us to fall into that trap. Look forward to what's right in front of you, Judy. Me. I'm right here waiting for you. And like I keep saying, I'm not going anywhere. I don't give two shits about fucking. When. I honestly couldn't care less." I tried to blink away the prickling at my eyes, but I'd waited too long. They were burning too much, and I had to rub at them to keep my vision from blurring. V wasn't simply saying all the right things. She meant them, too. I could feel her love, as though it were something tangible that I could grab onto and wrap myself in. But I was still holding back, stubbornly refusing to take that last step. "I didn't mean to bring you down," V said, wiping a single tear that had spilled down my cheek. "You didn't, really. Honestly, this feels good. It's nice knowing I can trust you with all of this. I want to trust you, V. Want to trust myself, too." V smiled, and I noticed her own eyes were shimmering as well. "I know. Small steps, Judy. Small steps. Right foot, left foot. We didn't dwell any further on it. The crowd was growing rowdier as the night wore on, and the younger, happier faces were replaced by those that had clearly had too much to drink. But the badges were making a good show of things to make sure matters didn't get out of hand. If they did, they would undoubtedly find themselves getting chewed out the next morning for allowing an unfortunate incident to happen. Before long, I began to grow tired, but we trudged on, gorged ourselves on funnel cakes, and even stopped to listen to some of the live bands that were performing. We'd nearly circled back toward the entrance when V's eyes perked up. "Hang on!" She darted through the crowd toward a vendor who was slumped against the counter, barely conscious. When I caught up, I saw that her eyes were fixated on a particular display. I followed her gaze and quickly caught sight of what had grabbed her attention. "It's Barry!" V exclaimed. She pointed at the small porcelain iguana, sitting on a shelf next to several others just like it. Sure enough, it was Barry, waiting patiently for someone to take him to his new home.
I wanted to tell you so many fucking times. I felt like complete shit for not telling you.
It seemed so long ago. Poor Barry had been shattered by accident, and I'd unceremoniously tossed the pieces into the trash. My memories of him would be forever tainted by the lie she'd revealed that day. V looked back at me, her eyes filled with hope. "Can we get him?" I wanted so badly to say yes and to let her buy it. It was only a cheap coffee mug, and there was nothing wrong with replacing the one she'd broken. But the words were stuck in my mouth. Barry was gone. So too was so much else. I took V by the arm. "He's gone, V. Gotta look forward, remember?" She didn't want to budge at first, and it broke my heart to see her glance over her shoulder and steal a final glance as I pulled her away. There was such sadness in her eyes, and I realized then that V desired the same thing I did, to go back to simpler, happier times. But we couldn't. We both had to let go of the past. The crowd was dwindling as we walked back across the beach toward the van. "Hey, V?" I nervously chewed on my lip. "Are you doing the same thing I'm supposed to be doing? Looking forward, I mean?" V kept her gaze fixed ahead of her, though in the fading glow of the carnival light, I saw her jaw go rigid. "I'm trying to, just like you." I didn't say anything further. The past was the past, and everything that had happened to me was over and done with. I'd assumed I was the one who would have to shoulder the burden of it all, but V had taken as much of it as she could. It was such a heavy burden, though, and I hadn't truly appreciated until now how agonizing all of this had to be for her. She hadn't chosen to be a victim. No one ever did, myself included, and we both refused to let ourselves be defined that way. But she had seen the XBD and knew every awful thing there was to know about my past. Even if she wasn't showing it, she had to be battling with her own demons just as much as I was mine. It didn't take nearly as long to get home as I'd feared. V opted for the highway rather than trying to cut through the city. It might have added a few minutes to the drive, but traffic was light and it allowed us both a chance to decompress. A pleasant euphoria settled over me as I looked out the window. It had taken 2 failed attempts, our impromptu date at Blue and our second diving excursion to Laguna Bend, to reach this point, but we'd finally done it. Connection. I felt closer to V than I had in ages, and all I wanted was to get lost in this feeling. We were both tired by the time we got home. I was tempted to go straight to bed and pass out, but I begrudgingly stripped out of my jeans and changed into something I could comfortably sleep in. I noticed V lingering in the doorway. "What's up? You sure you're okay with me sleeping next to you?" I sighed and crossed my arms. I thought we'd already covered this, V. Yes, I want you next to me. I like waking up with you there. Can get all the snuggles I need without having to get out of bed. V gave a small nod and began to undress. I was about to pull the blanket back and climb into bed when I stopped and looked at V. She had her back turned to me and was moving quickly, nearly stumbling as she pulled her legs out of her jeans. It didn't take me long to deduce why. But, I ventured, if you're wanting to stay out on the couch so you can, do what you need to do, that's fine. Could always find your way back to bed when you're done. V chuckled and turned to face me, her cheeks flushed and an embarrassed smile on her face. I look that desperate, huh? I shrugged, trying to hold back the sudden wave of sadness threatening to wash over me. Well, I'm not that desperate. But if you should wake up in the middle of the night and I'm not there and you happen to hear moaning coming from the bathroom. My own cheeks quickly turned red. I won't say anything, I smiled. Not like I haven't heard you before. What? V's eyes widened. You can hear me? Oh, come on, I said, pulling back the blanket. You really think the shower's that loud when it's on? Besides, you're not all that quiet to begin with. It's flattering, actually. Shit, V said to herself as she climbed into bed. Once we were settled, I turned off the light and snuggled next to V. Her hair still had that sweet candy smell I recognized from the boardwalk. I breathed deeply through my nose, relishing it. You smell good. Yeah? Wanna eat me? I burst out into laughter, accidentally spraying V's face with spittle. I was relieved to hear her join me, even as she wiped her face dry. There couldn't have been a better way to diffuse the tension. A long sigh finally escaped her lips. Sorry, that one was no slip. Just chalk it up to my dirty brain. V was pressed against me so tightly I could feel her heart beating against my chest. Or maybe it was my own against hers. It didn't matter. We were both nervous, which was comforting in a strange way. Christ, it was exciting too. That little moment of innuendo had been funny as fuck, but it had also sent my pulse racing, knowing all I had to do was reach out and touch her if I wanted more. I trusted her enough to know she would be careful with me. The only thing that gave me pause was whether or not I could trust myself. What if I fucked it all up? All it would take was one flashback, a rogue manipulative thought, and that delicate bond we'd finally restored could be torn apart forever. As much as I wanted to fuck, have sex, make love, whatever, I didn't want to risk losing what I'd managed to claw back. But she was right there, just inches away from me, waiting. My old mantra came to mind. Right foot, left foot. Why couldn't I let go and take that last step? In the darkness, I felt a pair of warm lips peck my nose. Good night, V whispered. I leaned forward and kissed V on the cheek. Good night. It didn't take long before V's breathing deepened, but I laid awake long after, trying to untangle the stubborn knot of self-doubt that remained within me.